Every spring, you do the same thing. You walk into that garden center, you see the tables loaded with color, petunias and begonias and impatiens all sitting there looking absolutely perfect, practically glowing under the greenhouse lights, and you think this is the year. This is the year the containers on my porch look the way I want them to look, all summer long. You bring them home, you pot them up, you water them in, and for about 3 weeks, everything is exactly as beautiful as you imagined. Then, July arrives. The heat comes. Maybe you miss a few waterings. Maybe the rain does not cooperate. And slowly, then all at once, the whole thing falls apart. By August, you have a collection of pots full of something that looks like it gave up on life, and you are standing there wondering what you did wrong. You did not do anything wrong. You bought the wrong plants. Not wrong because you made a foolish choice. Wrong because nobody in that garden center ever explained to you that there are 2 completely different categories of plants sitting on those tables. There are plants that were selected and bred to look extraordinary in a 4-inch pot under ideal conditions for the 8 weeks between when they arrived at the nursery and when you bought them. And there are plants that were shaped by thousands of years of drought, heat, poor soil, and genuine hardship into something that does not just survive in a container, but actually performs better in one than it would in the ground. Those 2 categories look identical at the point of sale. The difference only becomes obvious in August, when one of them is thriving and the other one is gone. The garden industry has no meaningful incentive to teach you that difference. An annual that dies at the end of the season and needs replacing next spring is a customer who comes back next spring. A perennial that comes back on its own for 20 years without any help from you is not. That math is not complicated, and it explains a great deal about what gets prominently displayed at the front of the garden center and what gets tucked in the back corner with a small sign that most people walk right past. Today, we are going through 9 perennials that are specifically suited to container life. Not plants that can tolerate a pot if you manage them carefully. Plants that genuinely thrive in containers, that reward neglect rather than punishing it, that come back year after year without you digging, dividing, replanting, or spending another dollar. And I want to tell you right now, before we get into the list, that there is one plant on here that most people have never considered for a container, and it handles deep shade so effectively that it will transform the darkest corner of your porch or patio into something that looks completely intentional and genuinely beautiful. We will get to it. Stay with me. Before we go further, do me one favor. Drop your USDA hardiness zone or your state in the comments right now. Just your zone, just your state, whatever you know. It helps me understand exactly where this community is gardening, and it helps me build future content that is actually relevant to your specific conditions, rather than generic advice that technically applies to everyone and practically applies to no one. Drop that in the comments while it is on your mind, and then let us get into this list. The first plant is Echinacea, purple coneflower, and if you have tried it in a garden bed before and had uneven results, I want you to hear something important. Echinacea in a container behaves like a completely different plant than Echinacea in the ground. In a border bed, it is fighting clay, compaction, tree root competition, and inconsistent drainage. In a pot, you control every one of those variables. And because this plant evolved on the American prairie, shaped over thousands of years by drought and thin, rocky soil and summer heat that would kill most things, a container actually replicates the lean, well-draining conditions it was designed for. The variety I recommend most consistently for containers is Magnus. It won the Perennial Plant of the Year award in 1998 for good reason. The petals are wide and horizontal rather than drooping. which means the blooms look fuller and bolder than the standard species. The stems are stiff enough that summer wind does not knock them sideways. It grows 2 to 3 feet tall, which is the ideal scale for a large container on a deck or front porch, and it blooms from midsummer well into September without asking anything from you. Here's the thing most people do not know about echinacea in containers. Do not deadhead it. Leave the seed heads on after the flowers fade. Those spiky brown cones are not just interesting winter structure, though they are genuinely beautiful in a frosted pot in January. They are a food source that American goldfinches and house finches will work through all winter long. If you have ever watched birds feed in your yard, you already know what that does for how the whole space feels. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Water it well when you first plant it. Let the soil dry out thoroughly between waterings after that, and then simply leave it alone. The neglect is not a mistake. The neglect is the correct technique. The second plant is one that serious container gardeners have been quietly excited about for years, while most people at the big box stores have never heard of it by its proper name. Agastache, also called hummingbird mint. And when I say hummingbird mint, I mean exactly that. This plant pulls hummingbirds and bumblebees the way a porch light pulls moths on a summer evening. The flowers are long tubular spikes in colors ranging from deep cobalt blue to warm peachy coral to sunset orange, and they bloom from early summer until hard frost. The fragrance alone is worth growing it for, a combination of mint and anise that fills the air around the container without ever being overwhelming. But here is what the garden center almost never tells you. Agastache does not just tolerate container growing. It actually performs better in a container than in the ground across most American climates. The reason is drainage. This plant originated in the dry, rocky soils of the American Southwest and Mexico. It has a biological intolerance of wet winter roots. In a heavy clay garden bed, the moisture that accumulates through fall and winter is often what kills it. In a pot with good drainage holes and a well-structured mix, that problem disappears entirely. You are giving it the sharp, fast drainage it evolved for, and it comes back reliably year after year. Look for Blue Fortune, which is hardy to Zone 4, grows about 3 feet tall, and produces dense blue-purple flower spikes that pair extraordinarily well with Echinacea magnus. Kudos Coral is a shorter variety at around 18 inches, better suited to smaller containers, and it is a hummingbird magnet unlike anything I have seen in a pot. Full sun, minimal water once established, and very light on fertilizer. Go easy on the nitrogen specifically. Too much of it pushes leafy growth at the expense of flowers, and flowers are the entire reason you are growing this plant. Plant number 3 is Lavender Munstead. And before you tell me you tried lavender and it got leggy and the center died out and you ripped it out in frustration, let me ask you the same question I ask every single person who tells me that story. Was it in the ground or in a container? Because lavender in a heavy garden bed, particularly in humid climates, develops exactly those problems. The base turns woody, airflow gets restricted, moisture builds up around the crown, and the plant slowly deteriorates from the inside out. Lavender Munstead in a terracotta or glazed ceramic container with proper drainage is a revelation. It stays compact. That bare dead center that makes in-ground lavender look ragged after a couple of years does not develop. It blooms longer because the container warms up faster in spring. And the fragrance, that clean, therapeutic scent, fills your patio in a way that a ground planting never quite manages because the plant is at a height where the fragrance actually reaches you instead of staying down at ankle level where nobody benefits from it. Munstead is the specific variety I recommend because it stays at 12 to 18 inches, which is the ideal size for a container, and it has better cold hardiness than most other lavender varieties, which matters significantly if you are in zones 5 or 6. The single most important care instruction I can give you is to stop watering on a schedule. Do not decide you will water your containers every Tuesday and Saturday. That is exactly how you kill lavender. Let the soil go completely dry, then water deeply, then let it go completely dry again. That dry soak dry cycle is what this plant evolved for in the Mediterranean basin, and replicating it in a container is the entire secret to keeping it alive and thriving for years. There is also a benefit to growing Munstead that almost nobody talks about. The volatile oils in the foliage are deeply repellent to mosquitoes, aphids, and whiteflies. You are not just growing a beautiful, fragrant perennial. You are growing a living pest management system that costs nothing to run and requires zero chemical inputs once it is established. Plant number 4 is the one I mentioned at the start, the shade solution. The plant that will change how you think about that dark corner of your porch that you have been ignoring because nothing ever seems to work there. And it is a plant that actually performs better in a container than it does in the ground for a reason that most people never consider. That plant is Hosta Patriot. And the reason it belongs in a container rather than a bed has nothing to do with shade tolerance and everything to do with what lives in your garden soil at night. We will get to that in just a moment. But first, drop your zone in the comments if you have not already. I read them, and I use them to plan exactly what comes next on this channel. Now let us keep going, because the second half of this list contains the plants that I think will genuinely surprise you. Hosta Patriot in a container solves a problem that most gardeners have accepted as unavoidable. Slugs. When you grow hosta in a garden bed, slugs find it with a reliability that feels almost personal. They reduce those beautiful broad leaves to something resembling Swiss cheese before July even arrives. Most people respond by reaching for slug bait, which can harm birds, dogs, and beneficial ground beetles. The problem was never the plant. The problem was accessibility. Elevate a hosta in a container even slightly, and slugs cannot reach it nearly as easily. You have eliminated the primary pest threat without a single chemical input, just by changing where the plant lives. Patriot is specifically ideal for containers because it stays around 18 to 22 inches wide, filling a 12 to 14-inch container beautifully without outgrowing it too quickly. The leaves are deep, rich green with stark, clean white margins, and what that white edge does in a genuinely dark corner is extraordinary. It acts as a natural light reflector, visually brightening the space without any direct sun required. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. One pot of Patriot left in a shaded corner will come back reliably for 20 years or more, with almost nothing from you. Sedum Autumn Joy is plant number 5, and it delivers something almost no other container perennial can match. 4 distinct seasons of visual interest from a single plant you basically never have to touch. Tight blue-green buds in spring, clean, upright mounding foliage through summer that never flops in wind, dusty pink flower heads in late summer, deepening to brick red in autumn, coppery bronze dried structure through winter that holds beautifully in a frosted pot. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, full sun, minimal water once established. Leave it alone, and it will reward you for it. Heuchera, Coral Bells, is plant number 6, and the reason to grow it is foliage, not flowers. Palace purple gives deep burgundy leaves, almost black in certain light. Caramel produces warm amber and peach tones. Lime Ricky glows chartreuse in a shaded corner. That color is present from the moment the plant breaks dormancy in spring until it goes dormant in late autumn, which is a far longer season of interest than any flowering perennial on this list can offer. The dense low mound also covers the soil surface completely, blocking light from reaching weed seeds. You get natural weed suppression built directly into the plant's growth habit. No mulch, no landscape fabric, nothing to buy. Salvia caradonna is plant number 7, and it solves the problem of vertical height in a container without staking or flopping. Dark, nearly black-purple stems produce vivid violet-blue flower spikes that do not move in the wind. It blooms in late spring, and a single cut down to emerging basal growth after the first flush triggers a legitimate second bloom in late summer. That haircut takes 10 minutes. That is the only active maintenance this plant requires all season. Hardy in zones 5 through 8, it prefers full sun, lean soil, and minimal water. Stella de Oro daylily is plant number 8. Compact, reblooming, and essentially indestructible. Waves of golden yellow flowers appear continuously throughout the entire growing season, rather than in a single flush that disappears. Cut the spent scapes at the base, and another wave follows within weeks. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. It prefers full sun, is drought-tolerant once established, and is completely unbothered by heat that would collapse most other perennials in a pot. Geranium Roseanne finishes the list at number 9, and it solves the cascading edge problem that sends most container gardeners back to buying annuals every spring. Violet-blue flowers with white centers bloom from late spring, continuously until hard frost, without deadheading, without cutting back, without any intervention at all. The reason is biology. Roseanne is a sterile hybrid that cannot produce viable seed. Every time a flower fades, the energy that would normally go towards seed production loops directly back into producing the next flower. The plant cannot stop blooming because its own biology will not allow it. 9 plants, 1 purchase each. Years of performance without replacement. That is the only kind of container gardening worth doing.